Call the dogs and put out the fire. Welcome to the 2017 Northwest Pennsylvania Grazing Conference right here in the Trinity Point Church of God, and I'm glad you're with us. I'm Baxter Black, cowboy poet and former large animal veterinarian, and I'm glad to be here. Virtually here, that is. On a personal note, I have a framed picture on my office wall of a horse labeled Black's Hamiltonian, owned by S. Baxter Black, Compassville, Pennsylvania, 1868. That's in Erie County, where my great-grandfather James Black came west through Wisconsin and Texas and wound up in Oklahoma, where my grandfather was born in 1866, and they named him Baxter. Well, the old folks I knew called themselves Pennsylvania Dutch. Oddly enough, my Okie father married a mountaineer from West Virginia and brought her down to New Mexico, where I grew up. And just to make our guest speaker Jim Garish feel included, my grandma was born in Sedalia in 1878. So, I guess we're all kin somehow. A small world, and most everybody here belongs to an even smaller world. Only 2% of the U.S. population is engaged in production agriculture. This is where NRCS fits right in. It's one of those government entities that works with us, and that's what this Northwest Pennsylvania Grazing Conference is all about. This year's the 20th anniversary. It started in 1997, and 63 folks attended. Grazing management of livestock was a novelty to many people then. Today I hear that the typical attendance around here is 200. It takes a lot of effort and thinking to bring this conference together, and my hat's off to Headwaters RC&D Council, partnering agencies, sponsors, and vendors for your support of the conference. And I'd especially like to commend Brittany Ditmore and Sherry McKaylee and their conference planning committee, because without them, none of us would be here. Well, I'm part of your world myself. I run 200 cows on 20 sections, annual rainfall 14 inches, 40 miles from the Mexican border. I buy grazing rights. We don't feed in the winter. It's a different playing field than you guys, but we're doing the same thing. We're managing our grass. And we have our own NRCS in Phoenix, 150 miles away, but they're always close at hand. The West is a big place, but so is Pennsylvania. You could drop me in the middle of the Allegheny woods and probably never see me again. I spent many years as a veterinarian working for a big livestock company that covered 5 states. Preg checking in the fall, I would drive for hundreds of miles, and sometimes I didn't always know where I was. A source of pride amongst cowboys is knowing the lay of the land. And any poor fool that gets lost, they figure ain't much of a hand. They said, "We'll meet up at Bull Creek," and then looked at me like a trainee. "Draw me a map and I'll find it. Columbus had nothing on me." Well, daylight broke into my windshield, headed south and loaded for Bear. I turned at the Grassmere station. I should have shot myself right there because nothing was like they described it. No mailbox where it should be. No coyote hide on a fence post. Now where's Mary's Creek supposed to be? Their map showed tourist attractions, including, I swear, Noah's Ark. Little old trickling Sheep Creek was wider than Yellowstone Park. I crossed the Cow and the Horse Creek and creeks named for nickels and dimes, through Knit Creek, Louse Creek, and Crab Creek, crossed Weller Creek 28 times. I drove demented and crazy, chasing my tail like a dog, coursing through desert and mountain, brush thicket and cattail bog. Fighting back panic, I'm thinking, I could die and never be found. Worse yet, I'll look like a gunsel who can't find his way out of town. Well, Harold was boss of the truckers, and I figured he might set me right. So I called him up on the two-way and explained my desperate plight. He said, "Describe your surroundings." I looked for a landmark somewhere. "There ain't nothing but rocks and sagebrush." He said, "Sonny, you're almost there." Well, it is a treat to be a part of this conference, so soak it up. We put a lot of work into bringing you something to think about. There are 300 million people in our great country going to work every day, but there are only a handful whose job is really essential: food, clothing, and shelter. And the greatest of these is food. If a man has enough to eat, he's got a lot of problems. And if he doesn't have enough to eat, he's got one problem. And that's what we do. We feed over 300 million people 3 times a day, every day. You ought to take a bow. We are of the land that everybody's trying to save. We are of the earth from the glimmer to the grave. We're the plankton in the ocean. We're the grass upon the plain. We're the lichen on the tundra. We're the clevis in the chain. You will find us on the outskirts, coaxing bounty from the ground, with our watchful eyes cast skyward, well beyond the lights of town. Dust to dust we are committed to the earth in which we stand. We are farmers by our birthrights. We're the stewards of the land. There are those who sit in towers who pretend to know what's best. They pontificate and dabble, and they bray loudly, and they protest that a peasant can't be trusted with the land to which he's bred, and they rail with the courage of a person who's well fed. We have labored through the ages for these power-hungry kings. We have fueled the wars of nations with their arrows and their slings. We have fed the teeming masses with our fish and loaves of bread, so the poor would sit and listen to the words the prophet said. Mother Earth can be forgiving when in ignorance we err, but she can die of good intentions. She needs someone who will care, not with platitudes of poets touting blood and sweat and toil, but with the daily care of someone with his hands upon the soil. And though the bullets become ballots and the rulers change their name, they will still march on their bellies. So our job remains the same. For the bureaucrats and the battleships and the Einsteins and the choirs would spend their life behind the plow if no one fed their fires. Well, I'll be showing up during the conference again, just to give you a break from learning too much.